So for our final discussion today, we're going to bring in Roberta Rubin. Roberta is a primal force in Chicago letters, a bookseller of nearly 40 years, founder at the Chestnut Court Bookshop in Winnetka, which later grew into the bookstall. She was instrumental in persuading New York publishers to send authors on tour to Chicago for readings at places like the Standard Club and the Union League Club. And she's also been a driving force in the establishment of the American Writers Museum on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, where she was recognized for her hard work and largesse by having the Roberta Rubin Room named after her. So please welcome Roberta.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's so nice to be here, to be included. I do have to talk to Fazil for just a minute. Something that hung in my office for almost 30 years was Mary Oliver's poem. No poet ever wrote to dishonor life. And I love that too. I have the blad just like you had, and it was right by my desk. So thank you for reading it this morning and for being here. I'm very delighted to share this moment with other booksellers. I was very fortunate in 2013 when I went to sell my store that I found a wonderful bookseller, woman in Winnetka who now has been running the store for 7 years. Her name is Stephanie Hochchild, and the bookstall at Chestnut Court is still open and very busy. So that is very gratifying to me as well. But then to meet all the other booksellers today, that's very exciting. After owning the store for 32 years, and then I didn't have to work during the pandemic, but I certainly had to fight some of the big guys that were there. And when Amazon came in, I went down to Springfield twice to talk to the legislators to please change the rule about not charging tax, that Amazon could save 10% on their sales by not charging tax. So I was a fighter in my day too. Within the past 2 years, I have joined the timing was perfect. I was there when the American Writers Museum started, and they chose Chicago, the center of the country, to open a museum. There was no such thing in this country. And the founder, Malcolm O'Hagan, came from Sligo, Ireland, and Dublin, where they had 3 writers' museums, Irish writers' museums. And he said, "Where's yours?" So we have one here in Chicago, 180 North Michigan Avenue. We have a Chicago room with several of our inductees into the Hall of Fame that are highlighted. But it's worth a visit for those who haven't been able to be there. And I'd love to show you around even, but there's plenty of ways that you can work with the museum. Then 2 years ago, Don Evans tapped me to be part of this wonderful Chicago Literary Hall of Fame. And I would just like to applaud them. I think they work well with bookstores. And I was lucky that I've met so many authors because my store had authors almost every day of the year in the last 10 years. And so I was very lucky to know a lot of Chicago authors. So bravo. And I'll take some questions or whatever, Jim, you want me to do.
We talked earlier about how you say in the years you ran the bookstall, you got attention from New York to actually get authors here to tour and actually stop in Chicago, because if it's not New York, Boston, or DC, it doesn't count. So how did that? How do you think that helps the growth of Chicago bookstores, or our presence in the map?
Okay. In the early 80s, I met a woman who had owned Chestnut Court Bookshop before the owner that I bought it from. And she would invite me over for some scotch at 5 o'clock. And she'd say, "Now, Roberta, you have to go to New York. You have to go to the Algonquin and rent a room there. and Bennett Cerf will come and Robert Bernstein. Oh, sure. Well, that part of it didn't work, but I went to New York, and I went at least 5 or 6 times a year. I eventually took Denny Cummings from the Union League Club and Mary Holloway from the University Club, and we all went to ask for authors. And there were a few other booksellers, one couple out in California, one R.J. Julia in Madison, Connecticut. And we went to New York and said, in order to sell your books, we have to have the author, or we would like to have the authors, not we have to. And that happened in the late 80s. I think that really helped. I'll never forget, I had Catherine Graham from the Washington Post one time for breakfast. And a woman held up her hand and said, "You're so important. Why are you doing this? Why are you going out and talking about your book?" And she said, "Because nobody will read it unless they listen to me, or I'm able to hand it to them, or they can shake my hand." And so she understood, and eventually the industry understood.
Do you have any great stories from the bookstall when you had a author for promotion? Did anyone show up drunk or in a fire truck or anything?
Oh, I have a couple who didn't show up, but no. One of my favorite stories is Larry McMurtry, who just died.
Yeah.
And he came and somebody raised their hand and said, "What did you think of the television production of Lonesome Dove?" And in a dry, droll voice, he said, "I never saw it." And the man said, "Oh, no, no, I'm asking, you're a big Lonesome Dove. You were the screenwriter." He said, "Yes." He said, "But that was as far as I'd go." So he was one of my dour authors. Lauren Bacall was not an author. She was a celebrity, but she didn't like the water, and she didn't like the shaky table, and she didn't like, but otherwise, I really have to say, authors are wonderful. Book people are wonderful. I'm always asked, how come everybody in the book industry is so nice? And I really think we are.
I agree. I mean, when I had a book and I toured for it, it's just a great time. And if you're lucky, a bad night is when you have 5 people show up for your book, and a great night is when you get 100, and all the nice booksellers, and they're giving you T-shirts. My T-shirt collection they eventually wore out. I had them for many, many years, but there's just no better time to meet people and say, don't you love books? Don't you love stories? And
right,
the nicest people.
Right, I agree. Sometimes they'd say, "Well, why do you think?" And I'd say, "Well, there's not a lot of money in it, but we enjoy our conversation and our connection." It's a charmed life, James. It really is.
It is.
To be a bookseller and an author.
And what do you think for the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame going forward? What do you see on the horizon?
Oh, I see great success. I'm a great fan of Don Evans and the group. And we're advertising, we're making inroads, reaching out to authors and writers and young people. I see forward thinking.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for everybody who joined us this morning. That was a terrific meeting. Look